So you're saying that as a trans woman, I can use the female toilets?
I'm talking about people
Someone
who've been
biologically
through,
born a man?
I'm talking about people who have gone through a process, often involving quite an extensive process. It's right that there are safeguards there. But alongside that, I do think we need to make sure that where it comes to, for example, women's refuge provision, where you're often talking about an accommodation basis, that there is a clear sense about making sure that women feel safe, that there's been a long tradition established about making sure that we've got that provision. It took a long time to get to that point. But I think in all of this...
But you won't put that into law, that's the problem. And that's exactly the point which J.K. Rowling is making again tonight.
We're now joined by Bridget Phillipson, Labour's Shadow Education Secretary. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for being on Times Radio, Bridget. A quick assessment from you on Keir Starmer. This will be one of the final times that we get to see both leaders answer questions. There were questions from the audience as well. How do you think you did?
So I think what you heard from Keir was a plan to turn our country around, to focus on the issues that really matter to voters, whether that's the NHS, which is in a terrible state at the moment, securing our borders, more police in our streets. In contrast, I felt Rishi Sunak was very negative, had a lot to say about things that he claims that Labour will do that are just frankly made up. And nothing really, I think, to say by way of his record. We've had 14 years now of the Conservatives. That's a long time to make your mark on a country. But, you know, I think what was clear is that there are still a lot of voters out there who haven't made up their minds. We're working hard every day to persuade them.
He did probably go further than he has done before on preserving single-sex spaces. There's been a lot of conversations about gender today. We've seen potential new rules from you that talk about a 2-year calling-off period after applying for a GRC, a gender certificate, to legally change your gender. And he did go further than he has done before. What did you make of what he had to say? If we break down those spaces he mentioned, he actually talked about sport, but he talked about hospital wards as well, didn't he? And toilets and changing rooms.
So I believe that single-sex provision is really important for women. It matters for our dignity and safety. And, you know, there's been a long fight to make sure that we've got women's refuge services, that we've got specialist provision where it comes to rape and sexual violence. But alongside that, I do believe we need to ensure that there is also provision there for trans people, that we have a more humane approach.
How does that look like, though? So if you've got toilets, for example, you've got men's toilets, women's toilets, what is the provision? What should be the provision for people who've decided to change their gender?
So we have a process where people who are born in one sex but identifying a different gender can go through that formal process. What we're setting out is a system where we maintain the integrity in terms of making sure it's a proper process, but removing some of the difficulties, I think, in terms of what people often regard as what can be quite a dehumanising
so I am
process.
someone who is biologically a male, but I have changed my gender. I've got a certificate to prove it, and I'm now a trans woman. Where would I go to the toilet? The men's toilet or the female or the women's toilets?
So I would, you don't police how people use toilets in that sense, but I would expect that if you were someone that had gone through that formal process of recognition, that you are, to all intents and purposes, for legal purposes, are regarded as being in a different gender, regardless of the sex into which you were born.
So
and
where do I go? Where do I go? The men's toilets or the women's toilets?
I would think that in those cases, people would be using female toilets, but that's something that has. But
that isn't protecting a woman's space, is it? So you're saying that as a trans woman, I can use the female toilets?
I'm talking about people.
Someone biologically born a man?
I'm talking about people who have gone through a process, often involving quite an extensive process. It's right that there are safeguards there. But alongside that, I do think we need to make sure that where it comes to, for example, women's refuge provision, where you're often talking about an accommodation basis, that there is a clear sense about making sure that women feel safe, that there's been a long tradition established about making sure that we've got that provision. It took a long time to get to that point. But I think in all of this...
But you won't put that into law, that's the problem. And that's exactly the point which J.K. Rowling is making again tonight.
Let's give you a little recap, or certainly have a look at some of the elements which impressed Adam Bolton, the Times Radio presenter and our big political brain. Should we talk about Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss? We've not heard this yet, actually, on our recap so far, Adam. And this a rare criticism of Rishi Sunak's predecessor.
I spent a couple of summers ago, saying that what Liz Truss was proposing was wrong. And I was behind, and everyone said to me, why are you bothering? Why are you still talking about this? No one wants to hear what you have to say. I kept talking about it every day of that campaign
why didn't
because I believed in what I was saying, right? And I said very clearly I didn't think that was right for our country. Right? And I was very clear on the first day I got this job that mistakes had been made. I was right then when I warned about Liz Truss, and that's why all of you can trust me now when I also warn about the damage that Keir Starmer would do to our economy, right? In that election, everyone said I was going to lose. I was saying something that no one wanted to hear, but I was saying it because I believed it.
A nice bit of defiance there from Rishi Sunak, and that sums up the tone of what we had from him tonight.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, I think both the leaders should be congratulated. In this election campaign, they have put themselves out for debates to show them. And if one looks over the course of the last 4 or 5 weeks, what one can see is Rishi Sunak becoming a bit angrier, a bit more forceful about his position, and Keir Starmer perhaps becoming a bit more confident and a bit calmer about his position. Now, maybe that reflects the expectations about the election. But on that particular point, it has been difficult for Rishi Sunak to criticise Liz Truss, can particularly give elements of his party are still in favour of her, and indeed Boris Johnson, and some of those maybe are thinking about voting for reform. But here he was very clear and truthful that, Harry Cole, to a certain extent, teed him up by saying, well, you supported Liz Truss. And the truth is he didn't support Liz Truss. He actually ran against her in the leadership contest. He was able to say that. And, of course, the implicit contrast he was making was with Keir Starmer and Jeremy Corbyn, that at the time that Jeremy Corbyn was in power, he wasn't contested by Sir Keir Starmer except on a number of issues. And that clearly was an awkward thing for him in his discussion with Harry Cole, whereas Starmer there contrasted with Rishi Sunak saying, well, look, a previous previous party leader, I took them on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hear from Keir Starmer, who, he had some praise for Boris Johnson.
To be fair, on Ukraine, he took a strong position. I was leader of the opposition, and I said we will support the government. And so there's been unity in Parliament from the outbreak of that conflict and Russia aggression there. And I thought that was important. Boris Johnson thought it was important because I think we both took the view that the only winner, if there was a split in our politics here in the UK, would be Putin. He wanted to see division in other countries, and we didn't allow him. So I do think, and I've also supported Rishi Sunak on this, and Liz Truss for the brief time that she was Prime Minister, and I still continue to do so. So even where there might be small disagreements between us, I think it's in the national interest, the country's interest, that we speak with one voice on something as important as Ukraine.
So he's urging for unity there, and defence and spending and commitment to defence has been in the past a weak spot for Labour. How do you think Starmer addressed it?
Well, that's important for him. What he wants to stress is the change, and without going into the policies which Jeremy Corbyn, his predecessor, espoused, he's making it quite clear he is pro-NATO. He made the point of saying that the original British signature on the North Atlantic Treaty was a Labour politician. And that is a very, very important message of reassurance, which he needs to get out. I did think he missed one debating point where he said, yes, I've been to Kyiv, I've met President Zelensky. He didn't say, and I actually met him on D-Day as well.
He missed the opportunity for a bit of a blow. I mean, are we seeing now Rishi Sunak try and recover after the D-Day debacle and after Gamblegate, or could Gamblegate continue to rumble on? We were talking to Harry Cole earlier, who of course led the questioning today, and he said you could physically, feel Sunak, physically tighten when he had to answer a question on Gamblegate, and that he was incredibly angry and he wanted to get his point across. But it is a very tough area for him.
Well, he was pressed at length by Harry Cole on that point, and he still hasn't answered the question, which is not so much is he angry about Gamblegate, but why hasn't he suspended people in his own party? Only suspended, not fire them until everything's been proved. But, the Metropolitan Police have suspended their officer. So why not suspend the people in the party? And I have to say, I'm genuinely puzzled as to what the answer to that question is, but he's sticking to his line.
Well, More in Common have done some polling on the worst Sunak gaffe of the campaign and found that voters were most put off by D-Day. Perhaps the historic nature and what D-Day means to the British public, that does hit harder. When I've been out and about speaking to voters, that is one of the things they identify, actually, Adam, because it is something all of us know about. We hold it precious, we think of our family members, etc. So that has been polled as the worst Sunak gaffe of the campaign by More in Common. Which leader will be the most pleased with their performance, do you think?
I think I understand that Labour are a bit taken aback by there being a show of hands at the end. They weren't expecting that and thought it wasn't.
How did you judge that? A kind of a 50-50 show of hands?
I mean, the truth is, the way the television coverage was done, you couldn't see, so it didn't matter.
The audience members were asked who they were more in favour of.
It seems I've been talking to those people in the room, and they thought that Rishi Sunak had the day. But on the other hand, I've just been talking to some of the audience who voted for Rishi Sunak, and they said, well, it's not about who we're going to vote for. It was just about we thought that Rishi Sunak put on a better show this evening. So it doesn't actually tell you.
A little bit innocuous.
It doesn't actually tell you very much.
Goodness me. Okay. Any other areas that you've focused on, Adam? You've been writing lots and lots of notes, rather charmingly in a pink pen, which I think is an absolutely wonderful image. What else impressed you? What else did you point out or pick out?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they were both challenged on obviously a very important issue of stopping the boats. And that was, I think, where Rishi Sunak came close to getting tetchy when he was challenged and made this claim that 15 European countries are also backing a scheme like Rwanda, which I think is a slight stretch on the situation, although they may well be moving in that direction. Whereas Keir Starmer, it's the longest exposition I've heard him make of what he means by cracking out on the gangs, by cooperation between legal and police authorities across Europe. So I felt that was interesting. As far as Starmer is concerned, he clearly has a problem with women voters in particular, but a lot of voters, about this whole question of gender identity. And as you know, J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, has been saying she's going to find it difficult to support Labour, as she's always done, because of his position. And I did feel he went further than he has done previously, saying, women's spaces must be protected. That included sport. And then trying, if you like, to play to the other side of the house by saying, we mustn't go down the road of self-identification, but on the other hand, we need to respect
the
that.
views and feelings.
And then, this interesting offer, which may be a feature of the last 10 days of the campaign, who knows, that he would like to meet with J.K. Rowling to talk about it. I mean, that would certainly be a major news event in the campaign.